It's true that I was sure sometimes whether Elizabeth was talking to me or to Kaspar. It didn't much matter either way. Both of us would listen as entranced as the other, Kaspar gazing up into her eyes with all the white, purring with pleasure, and me hanging on to her every word. Once she told us about the great ship she'd come over from America, about the icebergs she'd seen, as tall as the skyscrapers of New York, which was where she lived. How one day, when they were all at sea, she wandered off on her own to find somewhere to hide, and found herself right down below in the engine room. There was quite a kerfuffle, she said, because everyone thought she'd fallen overboard. When at last she was found and brought back to their cabin, her mother had cried and called her my little angel, but her father had told her she was the naughtiest girl in the whole world. She wasn't sure what she was. Afterwards, they had taken her to the captain of the ship, who had a great fat face and sad eyes, like a walrus, she said, and they made her apologise for causing so much trouble to the crew who had been searching for her all over the ship for 2 hours before she was found, and to the captain who had to stop the ship in mid-ocean and had lookouts scanning the ocean with binoculars looking for her. She had to promise faithfully in front of the captain never to go off on her own while they were on the ship. She promised with her fingers crossed behind her. She said, so it didn't count. So when it got to a rough day or two later, they were being tossed about in the biggest, greenest waves she'd ever seen, and everyone was sick as dogs. She decided she'd do what one of the sailors had told her to do if it ever got rough, to go down to the very bottom of the ship where the boat doesn't roll so much, and just lie down. The very bottom of the ship, she discovered, was full of cows and calves. So she lay down beside them in the straw, and that was where they found her, fast asleep, when the storm was over. This time they were both mad with her, so she was locked in the cabin as a punishment. She shrugged. I didn't care, she told him. Who gives a fig anyway? Back at home in New York, her governess was always sending her up to her room to make her do her writing all over again, or because her spelling wasn't good enough. She was always being sent to her room by her mother, too, for running around the house when she should walk, or making noise when her father was working in his study. I didn't mind, she said, with a shrug and a little laugh. I didn't give a fig anyway. In the holidays, the family would sail up to the coast in Maine to their 3-masted yacht, which was called the Abe Lincoln, and they'd live in this big house on the island where there was no other house but theirs, and no one except them, their guests and the servants. One day she decided to be a pirate, so she tied a spotted pirate scarf around her head and went off with a spade to look for buried treasure. And when they came calling for her, she hid in a cave. She only came out when she was good and ready. She knew they'd be mad at her, but she really didn't like anyone calling for her, like I was some kind of dog. So when she strolled back into the house that evening, she was sent straight up to bed without any dinner. I didn't want any dinner anyway, she said, so I didn't give a fig anyway, did I? Bit by bit, through these stories and dozens of others, I pieced together something of the lives of Elizabeth and her family. I looked at them now with very different eyes, whenever they walked by me on their way back into breakfast. Whenever I opened the door for them or wished them good morning, Elizabeth would then give me a great beaming smile whenever she saw me in the lobby, and Mr. Freddy would wink at me from the front door, and sometimes he'd meow softly as he passed me by. Such moments were enough to lift my spirits all day long. Life was suddenly good and fun too. Kaspar was well again. We had found both a new friend, and our secret was safe. Everything was fine, or so I thought.